It's a Monday morning. It's April 9th, 2018. We are celebrating the Solemnity of the Annunciation in the Catholic Church today because it actually fell, the date itself, during Holy Week. And when that happens, they move it to the Monday after the second Sunday of Easter. So that's why we're celebrating it today. 877-573-7825. 877-573-7825. If you have a question about Catholic education, on the phone, Tim DiLaura from St. Thomas, the Apostle Catholic School, celebrating 150 years, and also a major transformation. We'll get to that in a minute. But Tim, wow, 150 years. That sounds to me, I was thinking about this going into the interview this morning, unheard of in terms of a school starting way back when and lasting, not only lasting, but really growing and thriving. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Teresa. It's a beautiful legacy. We're very proud of it. Much grace, God's blessing on many people over the decades, pastors, teachers, parents, families, children, of course, and just part of the Lord's beautiful plan for the work of His church to reach out and to touch children's lives early on and to prepare them for our Lord's plan for each one of them, and we're very proud to have been a part of all that over all these years.
So what do you attribute to what or to whom? Obviously God first and foremost and the Holy Spirit, but what do you think your success is? Because there are, as you well know, as a school principal, Catholic school principal in particular, a lot of schools and parishes, or at least schools that have to be closed because of a lack of interest or students attending other schools. What do you think has led to your success?
Well, I think certainly our culture has gone through a dramatic transformation in the last 50 years, which has presented very clear challenges to Catholic education, and to try to understand how a Catholic school is intended to serve the people in a time of transition, a time where the principles that really underlie our Catholic faith are no longer the principles that underlie the common culture. And so I think that the Church and Catholic educators in particular are discerning and trying to listen in the power of the Spirit as to where the Lord is calling us. What are the signs of the times? And actually that leads to Father Bill Ashball, our pastor here at St. Thomas, decision to transform our educational model. And I think that kind of effort to remain in relationship to people, while nonetheless holding on to and being a faithful witness to Christ's teaching and His love is the secret to that success over so many years.
So you'll be offering, and you're looking at unveiling this in the fall of this year, a classic Catholic education, classical Catholic education. What does that mean?
Well, really, to understand a classical education, you need to actually realize that at the bottom of any educational work is a understanding of the human person, the human child. And all education before 1900 was classical. It was an accumulation of an understanding of the human person that was informed by the Church, after the Church was established, and just became a powerful vehicle for forming a child in the bigger picture of their own identity, the culture in which they lived, and a intelligent and loving God. And that worldview was at the foundation of educating a child until about 1900. And then at that time, you had reformers like John Dewey and others who were seeing the environment around them, the social environment, becoming industrialized, and began to question the principles that had been in play now for centuries in educating children. Began to question those and replace those with a different philosophy, a different image of the child, of the human person, to align it to the needs of an industrialized society. And there you had the child being understood not as an individual with an individual God-given identity and purpose ultimately fulfilled in their union with God. Instead, you had the child being understood as a vessel, as an empty or blank slate upon which was to be written the skills and knowledge that would allow them to function well in an industrialized society. And that was the origin of what is commonly called progressive education that has come to dominate Western education, again, since the 1900s. So it's only been 100 years that we have been educating children commonly in traditional public schools and in many other schools in that vein. And people are coming to realize that a classical education as it was lived and offered before the 1900s is actually capturing something essential, and that is not only do we need to teach skills and knowledge, but built on top of that, there needs to be a child needs to experience understanding, and then based upon that understanding, a child needs to be led to experience wisdom. And so a classical education is a culture, so it's hard to put it into a formula. Right. But one way of doing it is to say that while common progressive education teaches skills and knowledge, a classical education teaches skills, knowledge, understanding, and wisdom as well.
Yeah, if you're just joining us on Catholic Connection, we are chatting with Tim DiLaura, the principal of St. Thomas the Apostle Catholic Schools, marking 150 years, but also a major transformation coming up, and they're going to be unveiling this in the fall of 2018. Now, you have a number of events coming up, correct, Tim, that are going to be talking more detailed about this? That first one actually coming up tomorrow night, right?
That's right. We're going to have the interim president of Father Gabriel Richard, John Jajak, present on what is a classical Catholic education. And we're really inviting the entire region to come and benefit from this opportunity from someone who's been involved in classical education for many years to hear both the philosophical foundation, which is important to grasp in order to really appreciate the value and importance of a classical education, as well as its practical implementation in the Catholic setting, and to just realize the opportunity that we now have in the Ann Arbor region for having our children experience a classical Catholic education. So that's tomorrow night here at St. Thomas in our parish hall at 7 p.m.
And then next Wednesday, another event, correct?
Yes, we have Mrs. Mary Pat Donahue. Mary Pat is on the advisory council of the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education, and she came into that role in having gone through this transformation at her school at St. Jerome's in Hyattsville, Maryland, where they made the decision early on to move to a classical model of instruction. And that was more than 10 years ago when the classical education movement was not nearly as strong and well articulated as it is now. And so she was really a forerunner in this process, in moving classical education out of an individual education setting, whether it was homeschooling or co-ops, and moving it into established parish schools, which is where it's now spreading very quickly.
So I would think,
so she'll be here.
Yeah, I would think that this would be of interest not just to those in your own Catholic school and parish community, but someone who might be interested in learning something more just about classical Catholic education in particular.
Definitely. Both John and Mary Pat are deeply versed in the principles, the logistics, the content, the pedagogy of classical education. So this is a great opportunity for everyone.
Let me just let folks know again, if you're just tuning in on Catholic Connection, we're talking with St. Thomas Catholic School principal, of course, St. Thomas the Apostle Catholic School in Ann Arbor. They're celebrating 150 years, and they're going to be unveiling over the course of the next few months leading into the fall of this year the classical education and transformation, and the pastor, of course, being very involved in this. Two events, one tomorrow evening, April 10th, at the Parish Hall at 7 p.m. with the speaker being the principal from Father Gabriel Richard High School. And then next week on the 18th, so next Wednesday, more discussion, and this will be, as Principal Tim said, with Mrs. Mary Pat Donahue from Catholic Liberal Education, and then she's also, again, the principal of St. Jerome Academy in Maryland. What I find to be so fascinating, Principal Tim, is that everything old is new again. The Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun. I truly believe that more parents and people to whom I speak on a regular basis when I'm out on the motivational speaking circuit realize how crazy the world is getting. When you talk about a progressive education, it meant something, I think, entirely different when it first began, as you described it many decades ago, to now being where the human person is so fluid, according to this so-called progressive type of education. These ideas now being drilled into children in as early as kindergarten and preschool in terms of, oh, you could be a man, you could be a woman. So this understanding of the human person, it's totally off the rails.
It's true. And I think realizing that the human person has a nature, a given nature that
Right.
was created by God, and that our happiness is found in living in accord with that nature and being able, by grace, to have it fulfilled. And that whole understanding, again, of the human person is what will dictate how you educate a human person when it comes to all of the activities that go into a school and setting, school environment. Absent that understanding of the human person, yes, things will become unglued. It's true.
And it's just the opposite from what these quote-unquote progressives are saying in terms of children being able to function more successfully. It's just the opposite when you go against the natural grain of who you are. You're not going to be able to function because there's going to be confusion and there is going to be fallout from that. And that's what we're not hearing about, though, in our culture.
And that is the great lie. That is the great, deceit. There is sort of a duplicity involved where the real fallout of that loss of understanding of who we are and the attempt to actually define ourselves. No, all of that is hidden, and yet we see the statistics. We see what's happening to the family. We see the disorientation and the loss of hope, the despair in young people, and we scratch our heads and wonder why. And I think many are coming to realize that the foundation was ill-founded, and we need to have an understanding of the human person that links together, yes, the practical realities of needing to learn basic skills and knowledge in order to function and contribute and grow our society, and yet there is something vital, yet more subtle, that needs to be understood and spoken to and built up, and that needs to happen from, yes, preschool and kindergarten. All of that needs to be spoken to, and a child needs to encounter the beautiful reality that they are and to begin to explore it and rejoice in it and experience hope and creativity and joy in what God made them to be. And that's what a classical education seeks to do.
What has been the response so far for the transformation that's been announced and the move forward for that in terms of your own parish and school-based community, Tim?
Sure. Well, I think there are two groups of people that end up in our setting coming out. One are those who have already heard of what a classical education is. And they have heard of it through friends, through relatives, etc., what it means to be classically educated, and they're very excited about it. There are others who have not heard of a classical education before, and so Father Bill and I and those of us working to make the transition, our main responsibility right now is education, and so that's why we're offering these events, materials. Everyone is welcome to get a hold of us, and we'd be happy to email them our educational plan that has a very nuts and bolts as well as philosophical explanation of what is a classical education. So right now we're working hard to help people come to understand the beauty, the depth, the power, the relevance of a classical education. And actually that's one of the exciting things about seeing classical education move into sort of the institutionalized educational mission of the church, where you have parish schools now taking on a classical model of education, because now you have a whole nother portion of the church, of the culture, who are going to be able to encounter what a classical education is and why it is and why it's so beautiful and powerful. And that's very exciting as a means of getting that word out and moving us forward socially.
Awesome. Well, let me give out the information because we're out of time, unfortunately, Tim. Don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to make sure I get in the phone number. And again, if you'd like to come back on maybe next Wednesday and talk about how it went for April 10th for tomorrow night's event, and then highlighting, of course, next week's April 18th event, that will be great. Larry Niehaus, Ninehouse Director of Development, may be reached at 734-794-2077. Again, 734-794-2077. And again, this is two events. There are two events coming up. One tomorrow night, April 10th, what is Classical Catholic Education, 7 o'clock in the Parish Hall. This is St. Thomas the Apostle Parish in Ann Arbor. And then next week, April 18th, next Wednesday, why should I attend a classical Catholic school? And all the information, again, through St. Thomas the Apostle. You can give Larry a call, 734-794-2077. Principal Tim, thanks so much, and God bless you, and happy anniversary, 150 years. That's awesome. We'll be right back on Catholic Connection. Stay tuned.